Section 9, Parts 49 through 54 of The Painted Veil by Somerset Maugham. This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. Part 49. Kitty found the work a refreshment to her spirit. She went to the convent every morning soon after sunrise, and did not return to the bungalow till the westering sun flooded the narrow river and its crowded junks with gold. The Mother Superior gave into her care the smaller children. Kitty's mother had brought to London from her native Liverpool a practical sense of housewifery, and Kitty, notwithstanding her air of frivolity, had always had certain gifts to which she referred only in bantering tones. Thus she could cook quite well, and she sewed beautifully. When she disclosed this talent, she was set to supervising the stitching and hemming of the younger girls. They knew a little French, and every day she picked up a few words of Chinese, so that it was not difficult for her to manage. At other times she had to see that the smaller children did not get into mischief. She had to dress and undress them, and take care that they rested when rest was needed. There were a good many babies, and these were in charge of amahs, but she had bidden to keep an eye on them. None of the work was very important, and she would have liked to do something which was more arduous, but the Mother Superior paid no attention to her entreaties, and Kitty stood sufficiently in awe of her not to be importunate. For the first few days she had made something of an effort to overcome the faint distaste she felt for these little girls in their ugly uniforms, with their stiff black hair, their round yellow faces, and their staring, slewback eyes. But she remembered the soft look which had transfigured so beautifully the countenance of the Mother Superior when on Kitty's first visit to the convent she had stood surrounded by those ugly little things, and she would not allow herself to surrender to her instinct. And presently, taking in her arms one or other of the tiny creatures, crying because of a fall or a cutting tooth, when Kitty found that a few soft words, though in a language the child could not understand, the pressure of her arms and the softness of her cheek against the weeping yellow face could comfort and console, she began to lose all her feeling of strangeness. The small children, without any fear of her, came to her in their childish troubles, and it gave her a peculiar happiness to discern their confidence. It was the same with the older girls, those to whom she taught sewing. Their bright, clever smiles and the pleasure she could give them by a word of praise touched her. She felt that they liked her, and flattered and proud she liked them in return. But there was one child that she could not grow used to. It was a little girl of 6, an idiot with a huge hydrocephalic head that swayed top-heavily on a small, squat body, large vacant eyes, and a drooling mouth. The creature spoke hoarsely a few mumbled words. It was revolting and horrible, and for some reason it conceived an idiot attachment for Kitty, so that it followed her about as she changed her place from one part of the large room to another. It clung to her skirt and rubbed its face against her knees. It sought to fondle her hands. She shivered with disgust. She knew it yearned for caresses, and she could not bring herself to touch it. Once, speaking of it to Sister St. Joseph, she said that it was a pity it lived. Sister St. Joseph smiled and stretched out her hand to the misformed thing. It came and rubbed its bulging forehead against it. "Poor little mite," said the nun. "She was brought here positively dying. By the mercy of Providence I was at the door just as she came. I thought there was not a moment to lose, so I baptized her at once. You would not believe what trouble we have had to keep her with us. 3 or 4 times we thought that her little soul would escape to heaven." Kitty was silent. Sister St. Joseph, in her loquacious way, began to gossip of other things. The next day, when the idiot child came to her and touched her hand, Kitty nerved herself to place it in a caress on the great bare skull. She forced her lips into a smile. But suddenly the child, with an idiot perversity, left her. It seemed to lose interest in her, and that day and the following days paid her no attention. Kitty did not know what she had done, and tried to lure it to her with smiles and gestures, but it turned away and pretended not to see her. Part 50. Since the nuns were busy from morning till night with 100 duties, Kitty saw little of them but at the services in the bare, humble chapel. In her first day, the Mother Superior, catching sight of her seated at the back behind the girls on the benches according to their ages, stopped and spoke to her. "You must not think it necessary for you to come to the chapel when we do," she said. "You are a Protestant, and you have your own convictions." "But I like to come, Mother. I find that it rests me." The Mother Superior gave her a moment's glance and slightly inclined her grave head. "Of course you will do exactly as you choose. I merely wanted you to understand that you are under no obligation." But with Sister St. Joseph, Kitty soon became on terms not of intimacy, perhaps, but of familiarity. The economy of the convent was in her charge, and to look after the material well-being of that big family kept the sister on her feet all day. She said that the only time she had to rest was that which she devoted to prayer. But it pleased her towards evening, when Kitty was with the girls at their work, to come in, and vowing that she was tired out and had not a moment to spare, sit down for a few minutes and gossip. When she was not in the presence of Mother Superior, she was a talkative, merry creature, fond of a joke, and she did not dislike a bit of scandal. Kitty stood in no fear of her. Her habit did not prevent Sister St. Joseph from being a good-natured, homely woman, and she chattered with her gaily. She did not mind with her showing how badly she talked French, and they laughed with one another over Kitty's mistakes. The sister taught her every day a few useful words of Chinese. She was a farmer's daughter, and at heart she was still a peasant. "I used to keep the cows when I was little," she said, "like St. Joan of Arc, but I was too wicked to have visions. It was fortunate, I think, for my father would certainly have whipped me if I had. He used often to whip me, the good old man, for I was a very naughty little girl. I am ashamed sometimes when I think now of the pranks I used to play." Kitty laughed at the thought that this corpulent, middle-aged nun could ever have been a wayward child, and yet there was something childlike in her still, so that her heart went out to her. She seemed to have about her an aroma of the countryside in autumn, when the apple trees are laden with fruit and the crops are in and safely housed. She had not the tragic and austere saintliness of the Mother Superior, but a gaiety that was simple and happy. "Do you never wish to go home again, Monsieur?" asked Kitty. "Oh, no, it would be too hard to come back. I love to be here, and I am never so happy as when I am among the orphans. They are so good, they are so grateful. But it is all very well to be a nun. On a beau être religieuse. Still one has a mother, and one cannot forget that one drank the milk of her breasts. She is old, my mother, and it is hard never to see her again. But then she is fond of her daughter-in-law, and my brother is good to her. His son is growing up now. I should think they will be glad of an extra pair of strong arms on the farm. He was only a child when I left France, but he promised to have a fist that you could fell an ox with." It was almost impossible in that quiet room, listening to the nun, to realize that on the other side of these four walls cholera was raging. Sister St. Joseph had an unconcern which conveyed itself to Kitty. She had a naive curiosity about the world and its inhabitants. She asked Kitty all kinds of questions about London and England, a country, she thought, where so thick was the fog that you could not see your hand at midday, and she wanted to know if Kitty went to balls and whether she lived in a grand house and how many brothers and sisters she had. She spoke often of Walter. The Mother Superior said he was wonderful, and every day they prayed for him. How lucky Kitty was to have a husband who was so good and so brave and so clever. Part 51. But sooner or later Sister St. Joseph returned to the subject of the Mother Superior. Kitty had been conscious from the beginning that the personality of this woman dominated the convent. She was regarded by all that dwelt there with love, certainly, and with admiration, but also with awe and not a little dread. Notwithstanding her kindliness, Kitty herself felt like a schoolgirl in her presence. She was never quite at her ease with her, for she was filled with a sentiment which was so strange that it embarrassed her, reverence. Sister St. Joseph, with an ingenious desire to impress, told Kitty how great the family was to which the Mother Superior belonged. She had among her ancestors persons of historic importance, and she was en bonne cousine with half the kings in Europe. Alfonso of Spain had hunted at her father's, and they had chateaux all over France. It must have been hard to leave so much grandeur. Kitty listened smilingly, but not a little impressed. "Du reste, you have only to look at her," said the sister, "to see that confamilière c'est le dessous du panier." "She has the most beautiful hands that I have ever seen," said Kitty. "Ah, but if you only knew how she had used them. She is not afraid of work, notre bonne mère." When they had come to this city there had been nothing. They had built the convent. The Mother Superior had made the plans and supervised the work. The moment they arrived, they began to save the poor little unwanted girls from the baby tower and the cruel hands of the midwife. At first they had had no beds to sleep in and no glass to keep out the night air. "And there is nothing," said Sister St. Joseph, "which is more unwholesome." And often they had no money left, not only to pay the builders, but even to buy their simple fare. They lived like peasants. What was she saying? The peasants in France, tenez, the men who worked for their father, would have thrown to the pigs the food they ate. And then the Mother Superior would collect her daughters round her, and they would kneel and pray, and the Blessed Virgin would send money. 1,000 francs would arrive by post next day. Or a stranger, an Englishman, a Protestant if you please, or even a Chinaman would knock at the door while they were actually on their knees and bring them a present. Once they were in such straits that they all made a vow to the Blessed Virgin that they would recite a neuvaine in her honor if she succored them, and, would you believe it, that funny Mr. Waddington came to see us next day, and saying that we looked as though we all wanted a good plate of roast beef, gave us $100. What a comic little man he was, with his bald head and his little shrewd eyes, ses petites yeux malins, and his jokes. Mon Dieu, how he murdered the French language, and yet you could not help laughing at him. He was always in a good humor. All through this terrible epidemic he carried himself as if he were enjoying the holiday. He had a heart quite French and a wit so that you would hardly believe he was English, except for his accent. But sometimes Sister St. Joseph thought he spoke badly on purpose to make you laugh. Of course his morals were not all one could wish, but still that was his business, with a sigh, a shrug, and a shake of the head. And he was a bachelor and a young man. "What is wrong with his morals, monsieur?" asked Kitty, smiling. "Is it possible that you do not know? It is a sin for me to tell you. I have no business to say such things." He lives with a Chinese woman, that is to say, not a Chinese woman, but a Manchu, a princess, it appears, and she loves him to distraction." "That sounds quite impossible," cried Kitty. "No, no, I promise you it is everything that is most true. It is very wicked of him. Those things are not done. Did you not hear when you first came to the convent and he would not eat the madeleines that I had made expressly, that Notre bonne mère said his stomach was deranged by Manchu cooking? That was what she meant, and you should have seen the head that he made. It is a story altogether curious. It appears that he was stationed at Hankow during the Revolution, when they were massacring the Manchus, and this good little Waddington saved the lives of one of their great families. They are related to the imperial family. The girl fell violently in love with him, and, well, the rest you can imagine. And then when he left Hankow, she ran away and followed him, and now she follows him everywhere. And he has had to resign himself to keep her, poor fellow, and I dare say he's very fond of her. They're quite charming sometimes, these Manchu women. But what am I thinking of? I have 1,000 things to do, and I sit here. I am a bad religious. I am ashamed of myself." Part 52. Kitty had a queer feeling that she was growing. The constant occupation distracted her mind, and the glimpses she had of other lives and other outlooks awakened her imagination. She began to regain her spirits. She felt better and stronger. It had seemed to her that she could do nothing now but weep, but to her surprise, and not a little to her confusion, she caught herself laughing at this and that. It began to seem quite natural to live in the midst of a terrible epidemic. She knew that people were dying to the right and left of her, but she ceased very much to think of it. The Mother Superior had forbidden her to go into the infirmaries, and the closed doors excited her curiosity. She would have liked to peep in, but could not do so without being seen, and she did not know what punishment the Mother Superior would inflict upon her. It would be dreadful to be sent away. She was devoted to the children now, and they would miss her if she went. In fact, she did not know what they would do without her. And one day it occurred to her that she had neither thought of Charles Townsend nor dreamt of him for a week. Her heart gave a sudden thud against her ribs. She was cured. She could think of him now with indifference. She loved him no longer. Oh, the relief and the sense of liberation! It was strange to look back and remember how passionately she had yearned for him. She thought she would die when he failed her. She thought life thenceforward had nothing to offer but misery. And now already she was laughing. A worthless creature. What a fool she had made of herself. And now, considering him calmly, she wondered what on earth she had seen in him. It was lucky that Waddington knew nothing. She could never have endured his malicious eyeing and his ironical innuendos. She was free, free at last, free. She could hardly prevent herself from laughing aloud. The children were playing some romping game, and it was her habit to look on with an indulgent smile, restraining them when they had made too much noise, and taking care that in their boisterousness none was hurt. But now, in her high spirits, feeling as young as any of them, she joined in the game. The little girls received her with delight. They chased up and down the room, shouting at the top of their shrill voices, with fantastic and almost barbarous glee. They grew so excited that they leaped into the air with joy. The noise was terrific. Suddenly the door opened, and Mother Superior stood on the threshold. Kitty, abashed, extricated herself from the clutches of a dozen little girls who, with wild shrieks, had seized her. "Is this how you keep these children good and quiet?" asked the Mother Superior, a smile on her lips. "We were having a game, Mother. They got excited. It is my fault. I led them on." The Mother Superior came forward, and as usual the children clustered about her. She put her hands round their narrow shoulders and playfully pulled their little yellow ears. She looked at Kitty with a long, soft look. Kitty was flushed, and she was breathing quickly. Her liquid eyes were shining, and her lovely hair, disarranged in all the struggling and the laughter, was in adorable confusion. "Que vous êtes belle, ma chère enfant," said the Mother Superior. "It does the heart good to look at you. No wonder these children adore you." Kitty blushed deeply, and she knew not why tears suddenly filled her eyes. She covered her face with her hands. "Oh, Mother, you make me ashamed." "Come, do not be silly. Beauty is also a gift of God, one of the most rare and precious, and we should be thankful if we are happy enough to possess it, and thankful if we are not that others possess it for our pleasure." She smiled again, and as though Kitty were a child too, gently patted her soft cheek. Part 53. Since she had been working at the convent, Kitty had seen less of Waddington. 2 or 3 times he had come down to the river bank to meet her, and they had walked up the hill together. He came in to drink a whiskey and soda, but he would seldom stay to dinner. One Sunday, however, he suggested that they should take a luncheon with them and go in chairs to the Buddhist monastery. It was situated 10 miles from the city and had some reputation as a place of pilgrimage. The Mother Superior, insisting that Kitty must have a day's rest, would not let her work on Sundays, and Walter, of course, was as busy then as usual. They started early in order to arrive before the heat of the day, and were carried along a narrow causeway between the rice fields. Now and then they passed comfortable farmhouses nestling with friendly intimacy in a grove of bamboos. Kitty enjoyed the idleness. It was pleasant, after being cooped up in the city, to see about her the wide country. They came to the monastery, straggling low buildings by the side of the river, agreeably shaded by trees, and were led by smiling monks through courtyards, empty with a solemn emptiness, and shown temples with grimacing gods. In the sanctuary sat the Buddha, remote and sad, wistful, abstracted, and faintly smiling. There was about everything a sense of dejection. The magnificence was shoddy and ruined. The gods were dusty, and the faith that had made them was dying. The monks seemed to stay on sufferance, as though they awaited a notice to quit. And in the smile of the abbot, with his beautiful politeness, was the irony of resignation. One of these days the monks would wander away from the shady, pleasant wood, and the buildings, crumbling and neglected, would be battered by fierce storms and besieged by the surrounding nature. Wild creepers would twine themselves about the dead images, and the trees would grow in the courtyards. Then the gods would dwell there no longer, but evil spirits of darkness. Part 54. They sat on the steps of a little building, 4 lacquered columns and a high tiled roof under which stood a great bronze bell, and watched the river flow sluggish and with many a bend towards the stricken city. They could see its crenellated walls. The heat hung like it over a pall. But the river, though it flowed so slowly, had still a sense of movement, and it gave one a melancholy feeling of the transitoriness of things. Everything passed, and what trace of its passage remained? It seemed to Kitty that they were all, the human race, like the drops of water in that river, and they flowed on, each so close to the other and yet so far apart, a nameless flood to the sea. When all things lasted so short a time and nothing mattered very much, it seemed pitiful that men, attaching an absurd importance to trivial objects, should make themselves and one another so unhappy. "Do you know Harrington Gardens?" she asked Waddington with a smile in her beautiful eyes. "No, why?" "Nothing. Only it's a long way from here. It's where my people live." "Are you thinking of going home?" "No. I suppose you'll be leaving here in a couple of months. The epidemic seems to be abating, and the cool weather should see the end of it." "I almost think I shall be sorry to go." For a moment she thought of the future. She did not know what plans Walter had in mind. He told her nothing. He was cool, polite, silent, and inscrutable. Two little drops in that river that flowed silently towards the unknown, two little drops that to themselves had so much individuality and to the onlooker were but an undistinguishable part of the water. "Take care the nuns don't start converting you," said Waddington with his malicious little smile. "They're much too busy, nor do they care. They're wonderful and so kind, and yet I hardly know how to explain it. There's a wall between them and me. I don't know what it is. It is as though they possessed a secret which made all the difference in their lives and which I was unworthy to share. It is not faith. It is something deeper and more significant. They walk in a different world from ours, and we shall always be strangers to them. Each day when the convent door closes behind me, I feel that for them I have ceased to exist." "I can understand that it's something of a blow to your vanity," he returned mockingly. "My vanity." Kitty shrugged her shoulders. Then, smiling once more, she turned to him lazily. "Why did you never tell me that you lived with a Manchu princess?" "What have those gossiping old women been telling you? I'm sure that it is a sin for nuns to discuss the private affairs of the customs officials." "Why should you be so sensitive?" Waddington glanced down sideways so that it gave him an air of slyness. He faintly shrugged his shoulders. "It's not a thing to advertise. I do not know that it would greatly add to my chances of promotion in the service." "Are you very fond of her?" He looked up now, and his ugly little face had the look of a naughty schoolboy's. "She's abandoned everything for my sake, home, family, security, and self-respect. It's a good many years now since she threw everything to the winds to be with me. I've sent her away 2 or 3 times, but she always comes back. I've run away from her myself, but she always followed me. And now I've given it up as a bad job. I think I've got to put up with her for the rest of my life." "She must really love you to distraction." "It's a rather funny sensation, you know," he answered, wrinkling a perplexed forehead. "I haven't the smallest doubt that if I really left her, definitely, she would commit suicide, not with any ill feeling towards me, but quite naturally, because she was unwilling to live without me. It is a curious feeling it gives one to know that. It can't help meaning something to you." "But it's loving that's the important thing, not being loved. One's not even grateful to the people who love one. If one doesn't love them, they only bore one." "I have no experience of the plural," he replied. "Mine is only in the singular." "Is she really an imperial princess?" "No, that's a romantic exaggeration of the nuns. She belongs to one of the great families of the Manchus, but they have, of course, been ruined by the Revolution. She's all the same a very great lady." He said it in a tone of pride, so that his smile flickered in Kitty's eyes. "Are you going to stay here for the rest of your life, then?" "In China? Yes. What would she do elsewhere?" When I retire, I shall take a little Chinese house in Peking and spend the rest of my days there. Have you any children? No. She looked at him curiously. It was strange that this little bald-headed man with his monkey face should have aroused in the alien woman so devastating a passion. She could not tell why the way he spoke of her, notwithstanding his casual manner and his flippant phrases, giving her the impression so strongly of the woman's intense and unique devotion. It troubled her a little. It does seem a long way to Harrington's Gardens, she smiled. Why do you say that? I don't understand anything. Life is so strange. I feel like someone who's lived all his life by a duck pond and suddenly is shown the sea. It makes me a little breathless, and yet it fills me with elation. I don't want to die. I want to live. I'm beginning to feel a new courage. I feel like one of those old soldiers who set sail for undiscovered seas, and I think my soul hankers for the unknown. Waddington looked at her reflectively. Her abstracted gaze rested on the smoothness of the river. Two little drops that flowed silently, silently towards the dark, eternal sea. May I come and see the Manchu lady? Asked Kitty, suddenly raising her head. She can't speak a word of English. You've been very kind to me. You've done a great deal for me. Perhaps I could show her by my manner that I had a friendly feeling towards her. Waddington gave a thin, mocking little smile, but he answered with good humor, I will come and fetch you one day, and she shall give you a cup of jasmine tea. She would not tell him that this story of an alien love had from the first moment strangely intrigued her fancy, and the Manchu princess stood now as the symbol of something that vaguely but insistently beckoned to her. She pointed enigmatically to a mystic land of the spirit. End of section 9.